Yay. Looks like we're
Okay.
recording.
Cool. Okay, well, I'm Kristen Nuccetelli. I'm an undergrad student at Chatham University, and I'm studying sustainability, and I'm in a food systems class right now. And my focus question for my semester project is how and why are Americans able to maintain indigenous food sovereignty in the face of industrial food systems? And this is Courtni Hale, and I will be interviewing her to see what kind of knowledge she can give to me.
Cool.
Thank you, Courtni.
Yeah, thanks for the chance to talk about my favorite thing. If I get all amped up about it, try not to be upset. I'll get all excited. Okay. So, my background is just, 20 years or so of planting and working with other people who are activists who save traditional seed, planting a lot of gardens for kids, and doing research and education with Native American elders. Myself, I'm half Native American. I'm not sure that really matters, but it's out there now. So,
Thank you, Courtni. Okay, so my first question is, what is your understanding of the current status of Native American food security?
Cool question. What I've seen in the past 20 years is this amazing resurgence of the respect and appreciation for Native American seed and food. So it's really interesting. Like, essentially every little pocket of Native culture before the conquest was super specialized to its environment. So in terms of the seed, in terms of what plants, and the diet, and the way people's diet, adapted, and their bodies adapted essentially to their environment, was just super. It was amazing. Of course, with the conquest then came kind of more like a homogenization of the food. And, a lot of the traditional seed was either taken away or lost. So now we have things like Monsanto, and we have GMO seed that doesn't reproduce on its own. So what's happened is, as people started to understand how our culture was being taken away by our food being taken away, then there's this excitement. Also, people started to understand how health is all revolved around food. People whose diets were specialized for millennia aren't going to adapt to Twinkies overnight. I'm not sure that anybody can really adapt to Twinkies, but I think that the food desert and the really bad modern diet really hits Native Americans harder than other people, because we didn't have a lot of grains and sugars, and there's no alcohol here. So, what's happened is, with the rising awareness, basically people have begun to take pride in saving seed again. There are traditional places like pueblos out in New Mexico where a lot of that wasn't really interrupted as much, because the people are still on their tribal land. And there was the disruption of colonization, but they didn't move the way, for example, the Cherokee were marched out west, or the Lakota were taken out of their hunter-gatherer type of situation. They can't hunt buffalo anymore. So that food source has essentially ended. But what's happened out east is interesting. Like with the Mohawk Nation and all kinds of people out here, they've begun to find some of their old seed. So say you're doing an archaeological dig and you find a clay pot, right? It might actually have seed in it that's still viable. And they've planted some of the old corn that they found, and it was still viable. Wow. So it's amazing, seed that was sitting in the ground in an earthen pot for, who knows, hundreds, if not thousands of years. The seed is still alive. Like, that's how smart they were and how good they were at storing their seed. So that's pretty amazing. So there's been a huge resurgence of love and appreciation for traditional food, like Three Sisters and, wild foraging. A lot of the old herbal wisdom is coming back. And it's kind of cool because a lot of it has been preserved by people like Susan Weed, for example, who's not Native American, but she studied with a lot of Native American elders and gathered up their traditional knowledge and has preserved it. So we still know a lot of the Native American tricks of the trade as far as, wild-crafted medicines. So Native American food security, where is it at? It's getting better and better all the time.
It's good to know. Yeah, I guess it's just, just like everything else, a work in progress. So I was interested to know, like, I'm not sure if this knowledge has been with you, like if you grew up with it or not, but I wanted to hear the story of when you first began to grow your own vegetables.
Okay. I wasn't really raised with farming. A lot of my relatives from the Midwest were farmers, but they were already, kind of monocropping farmers with the tractors and the equipment and all that. So my aunts, I know from France, on one side of the family were big gardeners and canners. So there was always kind of like that epic myth in my family of, in the good old days, this is how we did it. So it wasn't a strange idea to me. My father was a nurseryman, and so he was growing ornamentals. So I grew up around plants. So none of this was like a strange thing to me when it came time to start planting for myself. I remember being a little girl, my father would take the seeds from marigolds, and he would say, these are Courtni golds. And he would tell me that they were my plant, and to save those seeds, and that we would plant them next year. So like the concept of all of that was there. It was present all of my life. But what happened was I had some kind of spiritual crisis in my late 20s, kind of around the time when I became a mother, and I started looking at the world in a really different way. With having a baby and having sleep deprivation and all of that, I think I started to be in kind of a dream state a lot more, and I started to have these dreams of a shaman. And I actually was able to track down the person that I was having the dreams of, and he was a Native American shaman in Albuquerque. So it was a whole string of synchronicities, and I actually went out there. I had been in Rochester, and I got bumped from a flight, and I got a free round trip ticket. And like the next Monday, basically, I was on a plane to Albuquerque with my son, who's still a baby, and he's 12 now. So I go out, I see the shaman. His name's Patricio Dominguez, and it just so happens that he's one of the biggest seed activists in our country, and had been throwing these seed sovereignty conferences at Tesuque Pueblo by Santa Fe. And so it's amazing. I go out there, and I asked him, I said, I want to be a shaman. He was like, well, yeah, that's nice. And I want a trip to Hawaii. Like, what's and I was like, no, really, I'm having these dreams. And I explained the whole thing to him. And so he's like, all right, well, let's go out and let's do some manual labor together, and let's see if you really have it in you. So he worked me for 8 hours outside, actually doing manual construction of a Pueblo structure called a kiva, where we do our ceremonies. And so after that, he was a little bit more willing to talk to me, because he's like, wow, this person's crazy. So we started talking, and I'm like really begging and pleading. I'm like, look, I feel like this is really important. And so he said, okay, let's do this. If you want me to take you seriously, Grasshopper, then you need to go home and do the wax on, wax off thing for a few years and learn how I see the world. Because Native American people don't see the world the same way as mainstream society. He said the only way that I was going to learn to speak the language that I needed to speak was through nature. So he said, go home, learn how to be sustainable, and learn how to grow, and learn how to wild forage and identify herbs and medicinal plants and all of that. And go and go to a Native American church ceremony and try to understand the mystical aspects of it. But your portal into shamanism is through the earth. So you need to make relations with the earth and understand that she's your mother. So 3 years later, I called him back and I said, okay, I did it. He's like, what? Is this that maniac from New York again? And I'm like, yeah. I had studied for a number of years with Susan Weed, studied herbalism. I had worked at a CSA. At the CSA, it was amazing. Community supported agriculture, I'm sure you probably know about it. We had people who were master gardeners from the co-op extension program. We had people who were seed carriers from like generations back, whose ancestors had brought seeds over from Europe. We had a Native American woman who was carrying some really amazing seeds too. And so I learned from them a lot, and I just fell in love with it because there is nothing quite so wonderful as the success rate and the success and happiness you feel. Because you have these little seeds and they look like little specks of dust, and you put those puppies in the ground and these little green things shoot up and you can eat it. And then you start to notice the cycles of nature. You start to notice how beautiful, how amazing. If you're farming, you have to notice the way the light changes in different seasons. You have to notice little bio pockets, like where to plant lettuce so it'll last over the winter. What kind of climate or soil does a tomato plant like? There are all these little things that nobody thinks about that I just fell in love with. And I have to say, I would never give it up. It's a great part of life.
Beautiful. I think you kind of pretty much answered my next question. I was going to ask how your relationship with growing food affects your well-being, and it seems like it's definitely changed your life.
Yeah, a lot of times people will come to me and ask me health questions because when the Western medical diagnosis is bad or they can't be helped, then they'll come to more traditional healers, right? And hope for a miracle. And it's actually pretty simple. If you start eating things that you grow yourself, you will heal. You just will. And it's obviously non-GMO because I've been keeping the seeds for all these years. It's more than just the nutritional value of it. It's the life force that's in these plants. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's actually true and it's measurable. When something is still alive and you eat it, you're getting a different type of nutrition and nourishment. So what it does is it just completely rocks your world. It puts you in your food destiny, for one. I'm not really producing 100% of my food, but I'm able to make good food decisions. Like I choose local first. I always choose organic. I'll do things like a lot of dried goods, like, huge bags of sweet corn, huge bags of beans and things like that. And so instead of having to run to the store all the time, I go and I clip herbs and greens and veggies from my backyard, and I add it to the soup that I make. So it's an amazing thing to be in charge of your food destiny, I think, and to have a relationship with it. I think the biggest part of it is having, I don't know, it opens your heart and it makes you feel like when you were a kid, when life was this magical place. That's how I feel when I'm in the garden. And my kids don't feel that way necessarily, but I hope they will when they grow up. So I don't know, it's not across the board for everybody. For me, it's definitely that way. It brings magic back.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm at the grocery store far too often. And when I'm there, I feel like I just want to get out of there. So, it seems like with what you've done, being able to access food within your own backyard, it just gives you more freedom and, more connectedness to what you're actually cooking and serving to your family.
And it's amazing too how much less food you need. A
Yep.
tiny little salad of fresh arugula or spinach from my garden and I feel full. Like if I eat a box of macaroni and cheese, oh yum, I love it, but I'm hungry in 5 minutes and I'm like, oh my God, I just consumed 1,000 calories. I shouldn't, but I'll be starving. So it's kind of weird. Like real nutrition actually fills you up.
The truth. That's the truth.
So in case you're interested in weight loss, it's also a good program. I'm not going to say I'm skinny or anything, but if you really were interested in like dealing with obesity and diabetes and things like that, then, homegrown veggies is the way to go.
So on that note, you said that people have come to you and asked you about nutritional advice. Wanted to see what kind of methods you take to educate your community on restoring food sovereignty, whether it be through nutrition or just, like talking about the benefits that come with it.
Okay. Well, the first thing that we do is we try to get to kids as young as we possibly can. So the foundation that I work for is to go out to schools and open up a dialogue with teachers and administrators about how to educate children. Because not only these are future eaters, these are people whose minds haven't been contaminated fully yet. So, and on top of that, they're going to go home to their folks and they're like, Mom, Dad, you're never going to believe what we did at school today. And then they take seeds or they take home some produce and their parents are flipping. At one school, so we installed a lot of gardens in New Mexico and did that work there. And before I left for New Mexico, there was a place in New York, in Warwick, where it was a community center. And the parents were working long hours. There were those like people who were commuting from outside the city all the way into the city and back. And the kids, I think, were kind of bummed and they felt like alone. And they had learning disabilities and behavioral disorders and all kinds of stuff. So we put in a garden and we taught the kids essentially how to grow the food, how to prepare the food. And when their parents came home from work, the kids would have for them. And it was mind-blowing, like the impact that had on people's lives, like the love, like you could feel the love, like the parents are exhausted, they already feel guilty, they feel stressed out, they're bummed they can't be with their kids. They know that their lives are kind of spiraling out of control because they can't live the type of life they want to live and still pay the bills. So, it was like a gift from heaven because, to see the looks on the parents' faces when they have a fresh salad and maybe like some pasta sauce, some marinara, and all of that, it was unbelievable. So the kids, getting through the kids to the parents is a big way. I teach a lot of classes out here in Delaware. I haven't really got on my feet yet as far as teaching. I just got here a few months back. But in Albuquerque, in the 10 years I was there, boy, we had a lot of classes. So we would teach gardening classes. We would collaborate with other people who already had gardens. We would teach on seed sovereignty, so how to keep your own seed. And gosh, even if you just grow some lettuce in a pot, that's a really big deal, actually. Constantly fresh greens and to learn how to save the seeds. It's like the power of God, right? To be able to create life.
Yes.
And then, believe it or not, kombucha is a really big thing I teach about. Because it has tons of protein and it's readily accessible protein. One of the ways that I try to put a hit on the petroleum economy is by eating local, by not eating meat unless it's local, organic, you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of our problems and the toxins in our water and all of that is coming from commercial livestock. So there's that, but then you need protein. If you combine beans and rice, you get a full protein, so that's not a problem. But variety is good, and kombucha is, I think I've probably taught over 100 kombucha classes, and thousands of people now are brewing or sharing about that because my teacher taught me that, and so then I shared it.
Beautiful.
Nobody really expects us to talk about kombucha. People are like, what is that?
Well, that's really cool, though, and I didn't realize how much protein it actually contains.
Tons, because those little bacteria and the yeast.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have a cell wall, they have a cell membrane. So as soon as that hits your stomach acid, the proteins and the nutrients are released. Whereas like with plants, you either have to cook them or put fats on them to break down the cell walls, which are thick. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's all that I have for you, Courtney.
Cool.
This was a lot of information. I'm definitely going to have to soak it all in, but thank you for everything.
Sure. It's nice talking with you. And yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right.
For now.
Bye.